Hello everyone, I hope that we are doing fine. Today I would like to talk a bit about an interesting topic in psychology, the mother wound. Since I started my journey as a psychologist and psychotherapist, I have been feeling that psychology is so interconnected with other fields of research and theory and has got an interdisciplinary scientific nature. I have been noticing that sometimes when I'm trying to dive into the depths of knowledge of psychological phenomena and facts and try to understand things, I cannot resist thinking about the powerful links between psychology, feminism, sociology, and anthropology. Since the ways we may conceptualize phenomena and problems may lead to contemplation or perception that we cannot understand things alone without borrowing concepts and terms and theories from other places, and that these fields of knowledge are interrelated and strongly intertwined. Well, I use trauma-informed psychology and related theoretical frameworks when trying to put things into perspective and understand the dynamics of problems. One of the most interesting topics, at least for me, in trauma work is the concept of mother wound, the way it affects people, especially women, and also the society on different levels. In my personal journey of self-development and discovering my psychology, I have been noticing that this is one of the topics which moves me forward to understand more and use my sense of willingness and curiosity more effectively. I think that it's worth using an integrative approach, and that we should inevitably take power dynamics, political and cultural movements and processes, equality and social factors into consideration when reflecting and trying to understand psychology and psychological reactions, for example, trauma reactions in people and also in social levels. A big part of my job is about facilitating trauma treatment and helping clients who suffer from different forms of trauma reactions. Many of them are people who have experienced mother wound. I think that it is a pity that this piece of knowledge and trauma perspectives in general are usually missing in our evaluations and assessments of crimes, assaults and traumatizing actions and violent behaviors, disrespecting actions which people may do against each other, in many cases men toward women. Mother wound is about all unprocessed emotions, frustration, anger, resentment, and following ingrained discrimination and prejudice and biased stereotyped thoughts, typically against women, which stem from the relationship of men with their first female figure, the first woman of their life, their mothers. We know that the early relationships, particularly relationship with mother, are important, yet very complicated. For a newborn baby, contact with mother is everything. This communicating sphere is so profound. There is potential for both flourishing, growth, nutrition, fulfillment, and also, exposure to interruptions, dependency, traumas, and limitations. In the mother wound, we conceptualize that if the mother herself is a victim of past traumatic experiences, her child will internalize her way of perception of the world, self, and people. And also that her own wounds and traumas, embodied experiences of suppression, discrimination, misogyny, and all hidden wounds in her body and soul can be transferred into this relational space between her and her kid. Especially when the mother has been, part of a patriarchy and society in which women in general have been suppressed or where capitalism and economic systems and the political and structural power dynamics within the society's different arenas has caused, restrictions and limitations in many levels in people's lives, especially for women, this impact will be huge, because we know that such systems are destructive, and unfortunately they can contribute to destruction and traumatization of multiple society actors, not only women, but also men, but also children, environment, climate, animals, nature resources, economic balance systems, and so on. And so transfer of fear and anger and pain within the woman's body can be shaped in the boy's body in form of internalization of the suppressive dynamics, anger and beliefs, which later on in life will emerge as expressed hate and also aggressive actions by men against women, as these women represent an internalized wound or trauma for men. Therefore, in studying mother wound and also intergenerational trauma effects, considering patriarchy and the induced, power structures and cultural values on women and gender roles, and all these dynamics is considered to be crucial, very important. So you can say that this very, important early relationship with mother is invaded by a widespread, powerful, destructive system which lives in very prevailing hidden form, not only in society but also in family dynamics. Of course, in a family dynamic system, there are more, dynamics and relationships than the exclusive relationship between mother and the child. But here I would like to focus on the mother wound, especially for men. So the way father will respond and behave toward his partner or the boy's mother, and the father's general perspective toward women and gender roles and so on will of course affect the establishment and manifestation and strengthening of certain behaviors in men afterwards. So both parents actually are embodied units of internalized beliefs originated from patriarchal related values and approaches, and the constellations of all these complicated dynamics will influence the way boy's brain and psyche will situate itself in connection with girls and women afterwards. So a concrete representation of such dynamics can be that the boy feels that his mother got a hostile or aggressive parenting style and gets agitated and easily angry at him, or that she's very dominant or controlling toward him. And all such tendencies and behaviors in mother can be studied and understood in the light of a trauma perspective. I mean, she is herself a product of misogyny, injustice and cruel oppression in a patriarchal system. And I think that her soul perhaps is just accumulated by frustration and anger against masculinity and all the man-like crafts and associated oppressive powers. So the thing that happens is that her son becomes an unconscious, symbol, unconscious system which triggers these hidden but still bleeding wounds in her soul. I have met, many women who had been suffering from psychological reactions due to previous traumatic experiences in their ex-relationships with their ex-men, who were, psychologically, physically, sexually, economically, very abusive. And many of these women had adult sons who had not been successful in their relationships either. And According to my knowledge, their wives and girlfriends experienced psychological violence and assaults by these men. And my clients were aware of that and tended to put it in a way that, okay, their son is just like their father. Well, it is very easy to think at the first place that, yeah, that is true. But there might also be other factors which can explain such intergenerational dynamics and the underpinnings of the problems. To be honest, I believe that boys and men are the first victims of patriarchy and oppressive power systems. They are the first human beings whose, experiences and authenticity, their values, their true selves, pureness and integration are invaded and suppressed. To me, it sounds like boys are constantly putting at a very high risk of conforming to strict stereotypes about themselves and opposite gender. And patriarchy shapes children, particularly boys. It dictates how they must behave as a man, as a power figure, how they are, expected to be as a gentleman or as a strong man, how they should treat their emotions, their feelings, and how they should, treat women to become attractive and interesting to them, and so on. So this happens already in childhood. It is tragedy. It is very sad, I assume. We have heard about well-known phrase, boys don't cry. So this is a very classical representation of an attempt to paralyze the relationship of boys with their emotions and their bodies, to destroy and to encourage them to deviate from the connectedness and their own power wheels and vulnerabilities, good intentions, values, and boundaries by devaluing and invading boundaries of women. That is why we need, a holistic version of feminism more than ever to help mankind to address, to understand, and to intervene, and also to prevent such dynamics. So a little boy who is, raising in a family and by parents who are themselves affected by such dynamics will be socialized into these roles. And as these socialization processes are influenced by power dynamics in interpersonal and relational roles, it will lead to formation of an association or learning about how they should behave toward women. So they will be enforced an idea of having dominance and power over women, and this become the reality of their minds and their existence afterwards. So this is a full betrayal, because they get stolen their freedom and their authenticity, and they will not dare to break through and stand against such a system, because this has happened in a hidden and embedded form all the time. And also that the stolen freedom is unfortunately introduced, and perceived as if it is a bonus and it is a extra privilege. And as they have been delivering dominance and power and the freedom of making decisions over women and becoming the most important person of the family, all other sorts of elusive and deceptive freedom-like privileges they are receiving, right? So for many of men, it is just as it is, and they understand that it is expected of them to be like this, and it is part of their identity to not to be connected to their emotions, to their feelings, to their bodies, and to dominate other people, especially women. So they will be also stolen their inner motivation and ability to see the roots of the problem. And this is where the problem tends to get stabilized and maintained. So he will be himself, oppressed by his parents by family, by society, by religion and other power relations in various forms. And then he becomes a young adult man who enters into an intimate relationship with a young woman, and suddenly he meets his mother in a relationship dynamics. It is interesting, isn't it? So he will be scared as his wounds start bleeding again. His body starts recalling the pain he felt because of control and oppression. And this is exactly what he backfires into his relationship with his partner. So his partner's female body will become a special place to running and practicing violence. Again, possibly in both explicit and discreet and hidden forms. Many of them may demand certain sexuality and beauty standards and criteria from their women and call it positive attention. Also, the women perceive it as a sign of love and sexual attraction when their men want them to look sexy and undergo beauty surgeries and become at some point reduced creature for being sexually pleasant and beautiful and attractive, mostly in the eyes of their men, right? So, and interestingly, many of women, not all of course, but many of women are willing and initiate such things and consider it as an obvious part of intimate relationship with an attractive man. So sexualized oppression and hostility can manifest in several different forms and levels, and is about unbalanced power processes and internalized anger and unprocessed old feelings. Based on this theory, which I believe in. The psychology of abuse is about understanding the pain caused by past traumas. The abuser is a traumatized person who has a low and very limited capacity and access and availability to own emotional world. So, acting out and throwing unpleasing emotions and feelings like fear and pain out to the relationship and the other person is a strategy for him, is a protective strategy, but very destructive one. So this ability to manage emotions was not established in the childhood, unfortunately, because the parents, mostly the mother, could not co-regulate with the boy, as she was herself angry and full of resentment herself, and she was also helpless and in pain of being restricted and oppressed by the destructive press offered by patriarchy constantly. So you see how this unresolved bunch of anger and traumas and frustration go through circles and cause malfunctions and pain and goes through generations. We have no other way to heal than making an attempt to understand and start healing ourselves. That is why I believe that to do something with society problems like violence against women, we have to involve men in the intervention processes, in support and healing processes, since this is about a collective trauma experience, and we cannot concentrate exclusively on women as the sole victims here. That's not true. Of course, this might, sound for you like giving a simplistic and very drained picture of the sophisticated reality which happens underneath and inside all these intertwining and complex processes, but still, I think that it is something to think and reflect about very carefully. So I hope that you have found these reflections interesting. Please comment your views, your experiences about mother wounds, your questions, and whatever you like to ask. Please stay in touch. Take care. Bye.